this point in time count, mostly useless.
Definitely. That's the title of the podcast now. Point in time count, mostly useless. As a politician, how did you get everybody to agree?
We didn't get everybody to agree. We got enough folks to agree. They don't want to start this and fail. And he said, basically the biggest disappointment would be not trying.
I would say quit fucking being Lone Ranger.
There we go. For a viral video.
For the fucking photo op.
What kind of impact did you have?
I'm like, all right, if I'm going to do this, I'm all in. And that's where I got inspired, because I saw you didn't have to solve the impossible. What you did have to do is...
You guys are in the news a little bit.
This site that we have a lot of people congregated on is in the 100-year floodplain. And I said, okay, we're going to push the evacuation. There's no point in bulldozing your tents if you have nowhere else to go. So I gave people almost 2 months to move to the next thing. I hated having to make that decision. I think that was the right decision, but I also know people think it was the wrong decision.
Rockford reduced homelessness dramatically.
There's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. You don't get elected and all of a sudden somebody just says, oh, here are all the answers to the test.
Good mayors borrow, great mayors steal ideas from other cities. As bad as things are right now, they're not permanent.
I received an email from Matt Tuerk, the mayor of Allentown, Pennsylvania, asking if we could jump on a call. He was listening to this podcast. When the mayor of a major American city reaches out because he's been listening to Homeless Unfiltered, it tells me something important, really important. This work is landing exactly where it needs to. If mayors are getting value from these conversations, then this podcast is having real impact. We happen to be in Philadelphia, so we invited Mayor Tuerk to join us in person, and he brought along former Rockford, Illinois Mayor Larry Morrissey, whose city became one of the first in the nation to reach functional zero for veterans homelessness. Don't know what that is? Stay tuned. What followed was one of the most honest conversations I've had about the realities mayors are facing right now. The pressure, the politics, the burnout, the misinformation, the grants pass fallout, the struggle to navigate federal systems, which is getting worse, and the impossible choices leaders have to make every single day. We talk about what actually works, what doesn't, why so many cities stay stuck, and what it really takes to create meaningful change at the local level. This episode is proof that people in positions of real power are listening just like you are, and they're hungry for authenticity. I'm excited. This was going to be the Mayor podcast, and it's turned into the Mayor and former Mayor podcast, which makes it even better. But I want to start because you reached out to me.
Yeah. I think I reached out to you. I was listening to the podcast. And
hear that? He was listening to this podcast.
Mayors listen to podcasts. It's interesting when you get into each mayor's particular playlist. But I was listening to the podcast, and I was struck by the tenor of the conversation, the frankness of the conversation. It was something that was appealing to me as a mayor who is, like many mayors around the United States, struggling to address chronic homelessness, struggling to address unsheltered homelessness, just trying to figure it out and trying to figure out every other city problem while the world continues to get a little crazier. So I heard you and I was like, I got to talk to this guy.
It made my day. Podcasting is something that is challenging. Producing not so much, but it's challenging because it is an expense that you can't recoup right away. Mm-hmm. So you do we keep going? Do we keep going? Do we keep going? And then you reached out and we're reaching mayors.
Yeah.
And we're reaching mayors with an authentic conversation, because I know you told me you were listening to the podcast with Ian.
Yep.
And that's the podcast. I mean, all of them are very authentic and good, but those are the ones that I'm like, wow, okay, we got to keep going.
Well, and that getting that message out is so important. And I think that mayors are looking in a lot of different places for guidance, for support, for inspiration. And hearing that one was good. And I think getting you having those authentic conversations is important, And one of the roles that mayors play is that we have to have those authentic conversations with the people that we serve as well. So either, part of it's looking for pointers, but part of it is also wanting to be able to extend that conversation beyond simply, the city that I serve, but speaking a little bit for all mayors who need to talk to people about the challenges that we face. It's never as simple as it looks on the face. It's true for homelessness. It's true for any number of urban challenges, and we look just for opportunities to expand the conversation a little bit.
Larry, your city, and while you were mayor, is kind of infamous in moving in directions to prevent and solve homelessness. Tell me about it.
So, how much time do we have exactly?
We have 6 or 7 hours.
There we go. Perfect. If I start trembling, it's the old PTSD coming back, because homelessness in particular is one of the most, we were just talking on the way over here. When I was elected, I had specific goals and ideas around homelessness. I lived in my downtown area. They nicknamed me Downtown Larry when I was first elected. I was very familiar with our homelessness challenges, had an agenda, was trying to push it, and I couldn't have been more wrong. We did a 10-year plan to solve chronic homelessness in my first term. By the time I was in my third term, we'd really gotten nowhere, almost 10 years into the plan.
You weren't alone.
Correct. And it was during the Obama administration, 2014, that I was approached about taking the pledge to end veteran homelessness. And I resisted because I was just by this time completely cynical, burnout.
Who approached you?
We were working. So during the Obama administration, there was recognition by the White House that the federal government was tended to be really hard to navigate. We were going through the Great Recession. We were struggling. We weren't a college town. We weren't a big financial district. There was nobody sending money to our community. But what they did send was we got a representative through the Strong Cities, Strong Communities program. And there was a woman named Lynette McCrae who was embedded essentially in my mayor's office, literally to try to help us navigate some of the federal bureaucracy, to provide resources to support us in trying to navigate some of the complex federal programs that are already embedded in our city with workforce training. And homelessness tends to be one of those programs that's funded by the federal government, but very, very difficult to try to understand and navigate as a layperson. And I was elected. I'm a attorney by background and training, but people start throwing acronyms around you around homelessness, and it becomes something that when you're in an urban community and there's a lot of challenges, it can be overwhelming. And so then you kind of just defer to the so-called experts. And what was lacking was that when I look back was really the alignment between policy level leadership, something from the mayor's office to drive our many, many folks who wanted to help, nonprofit organizations, hospitals, law enforcement, firefighters, all these different individuals coming into contact with our homeless population, but ultimately not making any progress, right? We were just sustaining a problem, right, not solving it.
And what kind of impact did you have? I know you're part of the Community Solutions.
Correct.
Obviously, they're very much housing first. Was that a big change for your community? And as a politician, how did you get everybody to agree?
Number one, we didn't get everybody to agree.
Right.
We got enough folks to agree. And I would point the finger at myself as the biggest, probably part of the problem initially, because I had a sense of the vision I wanted to accomplish, but you can't get very far with your team if not everybody else has bought into the vision. And what was, I would say, the key to ultimately driving progress in my third term, which I didn't get right in my first term, was aligning around a simplified vision. We did not take on the challenge of ending homelessness. I don't think that's possible. What we did adopt is this vision to reach functional zero for ending veteran homelessness. That's where we started. That didn't mean we had to house every person.
Right.
We had to house John Smith, Jane Smith. Every veteran that got on our list, we ultimately were able to demonstrate in less than a year that we were able to get them housed.
Right. And for those that don't know, functional zero is a model I agree with. It's a model that's hard to message. I don't agree with some of the messaging. The mayor of Atlanta stood up on a podium and said, we ended veterans homelessness. No, they didn't, right? And it creates distrust. But functional zero basically says, you know, if you have 100 homeless people, you create and strive to have functional zero, that you have 100 apartments. It's a little more complicated than that, but you know, that is the basis of the model. I think it's a brilliant model. It has some messaging challenges moving forward.
It can, for sure. You know, and the way I simply explain it is, we've shown the ability within a 30-day period to house any newly homeless individuals. That number, so for us, I think the number was like 15. So that was the first recognition. I literally went to a training. I've got an Instagram picture that I took back when I was in office of this training. And ultimately, I was cynical. I wasn't going to adopt the pledge to end veterans homelessness. My dad ultimately convinced me. He was a recovering alcoholic and Air Force veteran. And he's the one who finally, you know, I went to him. I was, again, cynical. And he basically said, I said, I didn't want to disappoint my dad. Yeah. I don't want to start this and fail. And he said, you know, basically the biggest disappointment would be not trying.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, all right, if I'm going to do this, I'm all in. I went to the training myself, and that's where I got inspired, because I saw you didn't have to solve the impossible. What you did have to do is get a list of the actual number of veterans and start working it. And what I had become familiar with was this point in time count, mostly useless, right? Yeah. One time a year, you're going to go out and count homeless people.
That's the title of the podcast now. Point in time count, mostly useless.
Mostly useless.
Says former mayor of...
Quote me.
You can quote the current mayor of Allentown on that one too. I agree. Confirmed.
It was a photo op, right?
As homelessness grows, people are getting frustrated, and they're pushing for laws that criminalize homelessness, which will only make the problem worse. Invisible People reaches more people, educating them on homelessness than all other homeless sector nonprofits and campaigns combined. But we do it on a limited budget. We don't have the funding they do. We are mostly funded by individual donations. And now that the economy is struggling, individual donations are disappearing, and we need you. I get it. You might not have the money to donate. Many people are struggling right now. Please share our content, share our videos. It really matters. And if you do have some funds and want to help be part of the solution to solve homelessness, please visit invisiblepeople.tv/donate. Our important work stops without you. Point in time count, mostly useless.
It was a photo op, right? And it was a way to make it look like you're doing something when you're actually not. Yeah. And I became very...
There's a lot of that in the homeless sector.
Which is why I wasn't going to do this.
For those listening, he just pointed at me to say, I agree.
I agree. A lot. And by the way, that's what, God bless the U.S. Conference of Mayors, but I had been around the organization long enough to know some of the stuff is just photo ops. And I had time for it. Right? Again, in a city like our communities, you have a lot of really big challenges, and I'm going to put my time and energy where it's going to be productive.
I have, and I'll go into it later. I want to talk about homelessness. This is more of my worst speaking gig ever was the U.S. Council of Mayors. Ever. By far. And I've had some, this was horrible. Horrible.
Rough crowd.
Oh, okay, I got to tell it. So I got to tell it. I was there, and I'm tag teaming with London Breed, who is the mayor of San Francisco, and who is the mayor of Philadelphia at the time, Kenny?
Jim Kenny. Yeah.
Jim Kenny. So they were doing the first part, and then I was to do the second part. And, you know, it was kind of a tag team. And I didn't sleep at night. I was so excited. I'm going to tell some truth to the mayors. I mean, a room full of mayors. Oh my gosh, what an opportunity. And Joe Biden was doing the keynote. And, you know, this is when he was vice president. And everybody knows Joe goes long. Joe goes long. Joe goes on. They knew it, but they didn't plan on it. So Joe went long, and everybody's just really anxious, right? And so I'm in the room. The London Breed and Kenny speak, and the person that was supposed to do the segue to me just spaced, so they left.
Oh, no.
And everybody left with them except an old couple, God bless them, that were just too old, a mayor from some small town and his wife. They were just too old to get out of the room quickly. And then another woman that was a young mayor that was a friend of a friend that promised to watch me. So I ended up doing the presentation to two mayors instead of the group of mayors, and it was just because my hopes were up so much.
You could have made a difference, though.
I-
that one mayor might have heard something.
I know.
But the message resonates, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the interesting things about, I was asking Larry on the way up about how he was mayor back in 2006 to 2018 or 17, and how the life of a mayor has changed and how mayors have changed. I think the moment that we're in now, we're dealing with a very different environment than he was dealing with in Rockford in 2014.
Explain.
And part of it is driven by the administration, right? He had the benefit of having an Obama administration that was at least nominally committed to helping people out of homelessness. We're right now in a Trump administration that signed an executive order that is really not focused on helping people out of homelessness. And
You think?
you'll say it more than I can, or than I will. There's also the grants pass stuff, right? So we're on this verge where the federal government has made statements about criminalization of homelessness, funding that helps cities address homelessness, that funding that allows us to pursue evidence-based solutions is drying up and getting harder to come by. The resources are limited. The support is limited. All of the other ancillary support, cuts to Medicaid and getting people off of their health care that provide them with mental health support when they're precariously housed. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And mayors that's just on homelessness, right? We're also faced with any number of more complex situations and an increasingly partisan environment. It's hard to do this stuff. And it was hard for Mayor Morrissey, for Larry, and he was bold and he got some things done. It's increasingly harder, and mayors are looking wherever they can for things that'll work, and we're looking for allies wherever we can. We want to be successful. I think that mayors in 2025 are compassionate. They care about the people they serve. They want to do the right thing. They don't always know what the right thing is, but they're committed to doing it. And they're committed to doing it in a way that eases people's suffering.
And you recommend Homeless Unfiltered podcast for all those mayors.
That's one place to listen.
Put in the plug-in. Go ahead.
Just to add something on that point. So I currently work in government affairs. We work with Democratic mayors. We work with Republican mayors, independents. I help run our public sector practice. I work with lobbyists in different parts of the country. One of the reasons why I love local government so much, I was a local government leader myself, but there's no place to hide. You have to get stuff done. And so there's a challenge of kind of interpreting what's going on at the federal level and then figuring out how do you actually get something done in your local community, sometimes because of, oftentimes in spite of whatever politics might be happening at the state and local or state and federal level. But that's what, to me, what became empowering about our work with community solutions, our development of the by name list, and our just what I talk about a lot is the most important thing that drove us to success. First was probably the vision, second governance. And so much of that we can control at the local level. And despite what's happening over there, but it's a little bit of art, there's a good amount of science, and there's a good right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. But there's nobody, you don't get elected and all of a sudden somebody just says, oh, here are all the answers to the test. Every community's kind of got to figure it out on their own because every community is unique and has different challenges, but also different resources.
So tell me about Allentown.
Allentown is a majority Latino city. We're the third largest city in Pennsylvania. I'm the first Latino mayor. We're a growth engine for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We're different than the Billy Joel song, right? The Billy Joel song doesn't tell the story of Allentown anymore. It's a dynamic place where there's a lot of exciting things happening, but we're growing up in a way as a city and starting to think about the challenges that face big cities that we might not have had to deal with years ago. So Allentown 50 years ago is 98.2% white. Today we're majority Latino. So over 50 years, we had huge demographic change, but limited institutional change. I'm the first Latino mayor. The city started to really become more Hispanic about 20 years ago. We're now responding. We have to start doing things a little bit differently. And we're like our neighbors in Bethlehem and in Easton, we're starting to face the challenges that big cities face. And that comes with it comes with a lot of headaches, right?
Yeah.
Where there's no playbook. I mean, Mayor Morrissey mentioned it. Like, there's no playbook for doing this stuff. So you have to develop local solutions that fit for your community, because every city has a bit of a unicorn. And that's what we're trying to do. I think there's a lot of people with good hearts and good intentions in Allentown, but they haven't seen this before. Yeah. This is new for them.
I haven't been to Allentown. So on my lens of homelessness, it was probably 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I think the only support was the Gospel Rescue Mission.
Yep.
At that particular time. I've been there a bunch of times on you have a very large drum and bugle corps show.
Yes, we do. Yes. DCI.
DCI.
The Allentown Rescue Mission has about 122 beds right now, and they're expanding. We just sold them a piece of land. They're a nice piece of the puzzle, but they're one piece of a puzzle that is for Christian men who are committed to a program.
Right.
We have a Salvation Army, which has some beds available. We have a shelter associated with our community action organization for women and children, but we are still missing. We've never had a year-round emergency shelter. Low barrier emergency shelter. We fund one now that is open 6 months a year from November to April. I just worked to get them to open a little bit earlier to assist us with an encampment that we had to evacuate recently. I want to see our city council provide funding support for the year-round shelter, but the YMCA, which is the organization that hosts that shelter, they have other competing uses on the site. Like we don't have a purpose-built shelter. And in the history of the city of Allentown, many leaders felt like we didn't need one. We need shelter space now.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Obviously, homelessness is growing.
Yeah.
I did a couple of interviews 15 years ago. People sitting on the library steps. It might have been the courthouse. But homelessness was probably a handful of people.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in Binghamton, New York. People would argue that there's no homelessness, and because it was, such few people, or it was, the town drunk, somebody they knew or whatever. And now you have homeless encampment.
I grew up in Boulder, Colorado in the 80s, and the public library in Boulder had an established
That's why you got into punk rock.
Back then. That was part of it. But it was also when people who were experiencing homelessness were part of my life as a 9-year-old, right? We'd go to the public library, and there was an encampment on Boulder Creek, and they were just it was part of being in the library. And when I got older,
interviews from there too.
I bet. When I got older and I started hanging out with punk rockers, like we had lots of kids who were like living in vans and living in squats, and hopping freight trains, and those are just my people. Yeah. So Allentown was like Binghamton, I think, at some point, and maybe in some ways still is. One thing that I say about Allentown and the Lehigh Valley a lot is that we're big enough to matter. We're the third largest city in the state of Pennsylvania, but we're small enough that you can wrap your arms around it.
Right.
And so the challenge, I spend time. I live a few blocks away from the library. I walk or ride my bicycle to work. I don't have a big entourage and security detail, and I'm checking in with the people who are...
That's what I thought Larry was, by the way. I thought, he's bringing an entourage.
That's right. But I spend time talking to people, right? And I think that's one of the things that I like about the podcast and about the videos is it's a humanization of people who are in a challenging situation. And what I think is to recommend to mayors or anybody who's watching those is to spend some time and get to know the individuals as human beings. Because like these unique cities, each person has their own story. And the way that we can get to helping find solutions for those individuals is understanding their stories. So the folks who are on the library steps, including Lisa and PQ, my guy from Liberia on the corner of 12th and Hamilton, I don't know if he's listening, but I'm going to give some shout outs here.
Yeah.
Like those are people that I get to see all the time and I'm invested in
Yeah.
as a mayor. And Allentown's a small enough place that we're not so big. And I don't think that any city is so big that city leaders can't invest in the lives of those individuals.
For us, our storytelling is a little different. Nonprofits mostly, like they'll produce a video that in their mind is for fundraising or play at their gala. And I've been very adamant, we have to tell the story of homelessness, which is a true, like you don't skirt around mental illness. You don't skirt around drug addiction. You don't skirt around all these issues that people don't talk about because that's a part of it. And if you do not talk about it, then people will just detach and say, that's not authentic.
Right.
And that has been our strength. But also I get some pushback from the nonprofit sector because you're not supposed to talk about that stuff. Well,
Go ahead. You can get pushback from your economic development sector too, because they don't want the town to publicize the bad stuff. Right. That's one of the things I heard at times was, especially before we got recognition from the White House and other, higher up folks, then other people wanted to help celebrate it. But when you're going through the hard stuff and you're trying to say, hey, we're going to focus on homelessness, there's folks in the economic development world that might not think that's the best way to market your city.
Right.
Yeah. If you don't want to talk about it, we don't have to. You guys are in the news a little bit for homeless sweeps and stuff.
Well, it's one encampment. So I'll tell the full story.
Sure.
So
please.
we had that shelter, our emergency shelter is open from November to April. And as we were approaching the closing of the shelter for the season, I went down and I was talking to folks at the shelter, like I do. I'm checking in with those folks. And we knew that some of the folks who were in the shelter, when they didn't have the shelter available to them, would relocate to the Jordan Creek area. And I went in advance with some of them a few folks who are already down there. And we just did some cleanups with our Commission on Homelessness. I think we scheduled 3 cleanups. First time I was down there was I think it was April 11th. And got out my jeans and rolled up my sleeves and cleaned up a little bit and just talked to some of the folks who were down there and understood their situation. And I was intrigued and I kept coming back, right? So I came back in May and talked to some of the folks, including Big Mike. Probably every city in America has a homeless guy named Big Mike.
Probably.
Our Big Mike is a guy that I love. I think he's phenomenal. And he was saying hey, if you guys had a dumpster out here, we can keep this cleaner, right? We're going to be down here. And I said to them, early on, look, there's no point in bulldozing your tents if you have nowhere else to go. It makes no sense at all. You just end up further up the creek or in another spot. Why bulldoze? And I said, I'm not going to do that. And so we were talking about things we could do to make it better. And
Thank you.
Big Mike, well, and that's the right answer, right?
Oh, it is. And it's the new podcast title. We're going away from when time comes. Don't bulldoze tents. Unless you got someplace to go.
Unless you got somewhere to go. And so what I said to the folks, so we said that, a dumpster would help, and the guys and the gals who are down there started cleaning up, and we're kind of keeping it in good shape. And I got to give credit to Adam Perot, who's one of our firefighters, who went and mapped out all of the encampments in Allentown on a GIS so we could know where they were. He and I just have worked together to make sure that the needs of these folks are met.
Homeless people don't mind cleaning. It's the bulldozing that's the problem.
Right.
The cleaning, because we have trash pickup, right? My apartment building, they come every Monday.
Yep.
And homeless people don't have that luxury. So cleaning, they welcome. It's the bulldozing that's the problem.
And we can, as a city, you can provide some level of service to support that, right? So to roll a dumpster out to the parking lot in the area, the folks will clean up and they'll throw stuff in the dumpster. Not everybody. There's some folks who don't keep a clean house, but
in my apartment building, I'm sure the same thing.
Absolutely. So we started that way. I kept coming down. We came down to talk to the folks when we had a flash flood warning and wanted to make sure that people were that they were aware. Right. And that night there was flash flooding, and our firefighters pulled 3 folks out of the creek. who pulled them out of their tents out of the creek.
Wow.
And thankfully no loss of life, but
Right.
it was a concern. A few weeks later, I was down there again and I talked to Julie, who was telling me, hey, like I just got out of the hospital because I had some GI issues because I had nowhere to poop. And it would be great, like, if we had a porta potty down here. And we kicked it around a little bit and I said, you know what, we should, like, that's not a big lift. It'll cost us $1,200 for the whole summer to have a porta potty down there. It'll make people's lives a little bit easier. And I kept coming back. I was like, we're not going to push you out if there's nowhere else to go. And then I got an email right after the flooding in Texas that claimed the lives of so many people from one of our fire chiefs who said, hey, I was looking at the map and this site that we have a lot of people congregated on is in the 100-year floodplain. And I'm really worried that if we have a flooding event, it could claim people's lives.
Right.
And that changed the math for me. And I said, look, we cannot allow people, we all agree sleeping in a tent is already unsafe.
Yeah.
Right? That's not the safe way to live.
Ideally, if there was housing or the resources to keep people employed so they don't end up homeless or can afford housing, encampments shouldn't exist.
So there's people in that encampment who are employed who just can't afford housing in Allentown. Allentown, because of it's a great place to live, and a lot of people want to live there. And if you don't build housing fast enough, and there's demand outstrips supply, one thing happens to prices, they go up.
Right.
And so prices of housing in Allentown, even as we have like 1,000 units under construction in the city right now, and it's still not enough to stabilize prices. So people are working full-time jobs and living in tents, and they just can't put together the 3 months of first, last, and security, secure housing. So I said, look, folks, ideally you'd have to be out of this site yesterday, but we set a date in August, the end of August, that we need to evacuate people from the encampment. And the intent was, part of that date was based on talking to the YMCA about an early open. And they said, you know what, like, we cannot do that date. They expanded their capacity from 60 to 80 beds. They had ordered all new beds. They were just coming off of all these other YMCA demands. And they said, with support, we can get to September 29th. And I said, okay, we're going to push the evacuation date to September 29th and give people a chance. That gave people, I think we initially announced this in like the beginning of August. So it gave people almost 2 months to move to the next thing. And we supported with our health bureau. We have a public health bureau that was out every Tuesday and Friday, engaging people, keeping them connected to things like street medicine, keeping them connected to the day shelters. We kept on top of people and we're trying to work those individual cases. And we got to know a little bit about the challenges that we had faced over the course of the summer. And we hit September 29th came and went. We got the emergency shelter open. My man Doug and Dana are in the shelter as well as a handful of other folks. Some folks found other spots that aren't in a floodplain. And the reality is, like, if they're not in a floodplain, if there's no danger of a loss of life to them or to a firefighter, what else am I going to do? Like, we're not going to bulldoze those tents, right? It's unimproved land that the city owns. It's not in the floodplain. Like, that's going to have to do for now, while we continue to build housing, while we continue to seek other temporary shelter, additional permanent supportive housing. We have to address these challenges, and we have to address them compassionately. But we also have to be realistic about what we can and cannot do. And I could not allow. I told a woman who's battling cancer, who was in the encampment, I hate that I have to do this, but I would hate more to you, right? You, a person I talked to about not having to move this encampment. I hate that I have to do it, but I would hate to. Her son lives in New Jersey. I hate to have to tell your son that his mom died because we had some bullshit hurricane thing that we couldn't have predicted. And I was straightforward with people. I hated having to make that decision. Unfortunately, that's part of what you do as a mayor every day, is you make a decision that doesn't feel good, but in the long run is something you have to do.
Right.
And we all do that. And that, but you do it from a place of compassion, and you do it. I go back to something I was saying earlier, is that we sometimes, I think that was the right decision, but I also know people think it was the wrong decision. I hear from people who think that was the wrong decision, and I need to hear from folks, because we'll have opportunity. We'll have to deal with stuff like this again.
Right.
And mayors have to be open, and elected officials across the country have to be open to criticism. If people who are...
Well, that's a hard one. It's a hard pill to swallow. I have a post, organizational silence. That is the recipe for failure. I used some case studies. The Coast Guard, when after 9/11 was commissioned, now they have to protect the coasts at a different level. So somebody came up with an idea that we're going to extend the boats. Instead of buying new boats, we're going to extend the boats. It was Operation Deepwater, I think. I'll link to the post in the description. And like they're buying walkie-talkies and radios that aren't waterproof. And people were too scared to speak up. That's just one example. But it was a complete $250 billion failure. I don't remember the dollar amount, my post I wrote was talking about housing and homelessness and housing first, because you're very open to, gosh, I want to know if we're doing wrong, because maybe I can course correct. Maybe it's something I didn't see. Maybe I was doing wrong. Maybe we're doing it right, but I still want to hear from you, whatever that is. But the operational silence is so dangerous. And you said in urban development or economic development, in the homeless sector, nobody wants to raise their hand and said, you know what? Yeah. We're failing. We're doing wrong, right? I get it. That's the human nature, but we have to embrace that as soon. Oh, I got it. We were in Finland, and we're out with the outreach team. So I don't know. You probably are aware that Finland is, credited for being housing first and reducing homelessness, and everything they do, we could duplicate. Except one thing. And we're out with the outreach team, and they tell us, they say, we write a report that nobody can influence what we put in the report, that goes to our boss, to the news media, and to all the politicians at the same time. Wow. And what it is they have a culture they want to improve. Yeah. So even though I'm sure people get mad, how could you put that in the report? They encourage this open communication and open ideas so that they can actually prevent and solve homelessness, which is what it should be about.
So that's interesting. I think that, and again, to go back to the conversation about how the job of mayor has evolved over time, I think there's organizations who are committed to building capacity among mayors. And one of the things that we talk about a lot, and don't just talk but do, is about evidence-based decision making, right? Letting the information or data inform our decision making. And that, in order to be effective doing that, you have to have a good evaluation mechanism, right? And the evaluation mechanism has to give you feedback. And I might not get the outreach team giving me the report, but I'm getting text messages from the various different members of the Commission on Homelessness, letting me know exactly what I'm not doing right. I'm getting messages from Big Mike, or Tattoo Mike, and Jess, and Doug. They all have my cell phone number, right? So those folks will let me know exactly what I'm not doing right, or they'll show up at city council, and we hear it, right? And at that level of openness, like having an evaluation mechanism, using data to inform your decision making, innovating, like thinking about what they do in Finland. Or I was in Germany last year, and I was fascinated by, we were the guests of the farm ministry, and they were doing transatlantic solutions for 12 different cities, looking at German cities and how they could be effective in resolving things like crime, the things that cities everywhere are facing. And we talked about homelessness and the challenges that they have with homelessness in Germany, and a lot of it's driven by refugees from Ukraine. But I was struck by Germany's definition of homelessness. In Germany, you're homeless if you don't have a lease or you don't own your home, right? It's a much simpler and more elegant definition than we have in the United States. And in Berlin's one of the big cities of Europe, there's not a lot of street homelessness, in part because they're committed, they have a commitment to resolving it in a way that we don't. And so taking ideas from Finland, taking ideas from Germany, taking ideas from cities like Rockford where they can be effective, mayors are good at borrowing. Good mayors borrow, great mayors steal ideas from other cities. But innovation and data, but collaboration is the other big piece of that. And having to have a functional, active collaboration, you have to be vulnerable, right? You have to be willing to have the Health Network or the United Way tell you that your particular position or what you're doing is not helping.
Yeah. Larry, Rockford reduced homelessness dramatically. Has it maintained that?
Yes, I can give you the exact numbers. I'm not as close to it.
I'm just, because what we've seen, like I've seen it in Utah, I've seen it in other places, as soon as the leadership changes, then policies change. And
so as you were talking about data and I think the three most important elements to sustaining success, it starts with vision, then data, but I'd say the most important thing is governance. And having a system of governance that keeps the vision on track, makes the data meaningful and actionable, is something, that's what we were missing most of all. And I would say we built a system of governance that every mayor, every local community may do it a little bit differently, but ultimately being able to align the three elements of governance, which is your policy group, your elected officials, so your key operating folks, who I would say probably are the most important to keeping things on track, which is not me, right? And I'm up here in this group. You've got operations folks that in our case are looking at that by name list, have all the collaboration. And then you've got the outreach workers, the tactical folks, the police officers, firefighters, healthcare workers that are in the streets doing that work. And then just having a system that keeps those components in sort of a continuous loop of effort. That was really critical for us. And that's how I think organizations and communities can sustain success.
How can nonprofits help? I don't want to say accelerate, although that's what first comes to mind. And let me back up a little bit, because I don't think it's nonprofits. It's businesses, it's faith leaders, it's nonprofits and governments. How do you get everybody working together?
Yeah, so there's a big difference. We were doing collaboration. Every community does some sort of collaboration. There's a difference between collaboration and what I came to learn, a term called collective impact. And the critical difference is having a backbone agency that is neutral. It's sort of the Switzerland of folks that can hold everybody in the collaborative partnership accountable. And that ended up being for us, and this is where the jargon comes in, that I didn't know about my first term. By the time I got to my third term, I figured out a lot of it. I didn't realize what we had until later on, which was we were the federally recognized community action agency for a multi-county area. The City of Rockford Human Services Organization was that. In most places across the country, that's typically a nonprofit. And that community action agency also managed another jargon, continuum of care, when it came to homelessness. And so as mayor, I had this dual kind of usually aligned but sometimes conflicting roles, being the mayor of the city, but also the leader supporting this multi-county agency, community action agency, and then receiving federal dollars for anybody who's part of our continuum of care. So once we've third term, go to this HUD Region 5 meeting, I start to see the light around population health, and it was the same thing we were doing, ironically, for the company I now work for. Actually, not ironically, it was probably in large part because of I had come to learn about population health, taking care of city employees and our self-insured plan. when I started to hear about this by name list, I'm like, that's what these folks were talking about when it came to diabetics and folks with cardiovascular disease. You've got to identify your population of people who have this ailment, and then you can't wait for them to go to you. You got to go to them. And then you start checking it off the box, right? So a large part of our success was just understanding how to get these tools and resources that were already there. They were there my entire time in office, but getting them to be effective and then moving beyond collaboration towards collective impact.
Yeah. Well, let me ask both of you, and you can, whichever order, doesn't matter, is how can constituents take action? And I want to separate this both because I think now local is the most important, right? That's where shit happens. When shit gets done, change happens. But now we have this federal that is making it harder for stuff. So how does someone like me that's concerned as a citizen basically speak up that or do tangible actions that will influence positive change?
I'll let you go first.
Hey, flip a coin.
So, again, I think I shared this a little bit earlier. I by the way, got elected as an independent in a very partisan town. Part of my philosophy, and as I look back, by the way, I'm very pleased with my decision that I made as a young person when I was 29, when I decided to first get involved really in running for elected office. But I think there's a pragmatism that is critical in a local community that I think can be drawn upon for people to get to work and take action. The danger I feel right now in the environment we shared earlier, I think it's just tougher right now than it was when I was in office, is that there's groups that want to suck you into, different sort of wars around ideology that then make it hard to actually take concrete.
They paint the different idea as they're the enemy.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And so when it comes to something like homelessness, there's just a ton of very practical. That's why, I love talking about governance, because it's not Republican, it's not Democrat. It's just sort of a business approach to getting your resources effectively marshaled to actually improve outcomes in your community. I think that's a good thing. I think you can rally people around blue, red, whatever. I think you can rally people around taking action that's going to lead to very practical, measurable outcomes in your community.
I think there's a lot that individuals can do. And there's a lot of... I didn't curse as much as I usually do.
I know, you said poop.
Yeah.
You got it bad as poop.
Shocking.
Poop.
One thing I'd say, the first, I would say quit fucking being Lone Ranger.
There we go.
Quit. One thing that you can do is something you can stop doing, which is quit showing up at the encampment with the plate full of sandwiches and taking Facebook videos of you saving the homeless people. That shit doesn't fly. It undermines the effort of organizations that are working to truly address this problem.
And just to clarify, you're not saying don't do charity. You're saying don't do charity for a viral video.
For the fucking photo op, right?
Yeah.
The mayors are guilty of the photo op, but so are the people who want to go out and I'm going to do my good deed for the day.
There's charity influencers now, driving me crazy.
It sucks. So that is tough when serious people are trying to address these challenges and these very complex challenges. When you get out there and you kind of try to shake it up because you're not happy about leadership and you're going to go in and do your own thing, we can't be effective when we're doing that. So if you're not happy with the direction that the country is going in, you can go to your congressman's office, right? Show up and let them know that you're not happy about cutting Medicaid and the impact that that's going to have on people who are struggling with mental health. If you're not happy that your city council is criminalizing homelessness, or that your city council is trying to be political and send a message about, trying to make a political position around homelessness, go speak up, get in touch with those people, talk to your mayors, but the best way I think is to is be charitable, by getting involved with the organizations, right? And show up and ask how you can help. Don't show up with a solution. Ask how you can help, and ask the organizations that are committed to addressing homelessness. But also, like, talk to somebody who's there. Big Mike will tell you exactly what you can do. And chances are he's not going to ask you to bring a tuna fish sandwich that got thrown out at the supermarket. Like, he's going to ask you to do like real impactful things. Ask people who know. And I'd say that to the individuals, but I also say that to the elected officials. Like, if you ask, they'll tell you.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to add?
So just on that point, ultimately, you don't have to solve all those complex human problems. Just get your list, right? And start working your list in a way that's accountable, that's got visibility to the key stakeholders. That was super important for us and helped lead to some of our success.
Anything you'd like to close us out with? Anything you'd like to add?
Appreciate getting a lift from the mayor. He saw me on the side of the road and giving me that ride to Allentown, and looking forward to sharing some experiences when we get to the city, and love the opportunity to have these conversations. Really important. I think the opportunity to have a candid conversation is super helpful.
I just want to thank you for doing this. There's not a lot of people who are in various different forms of media who are having regular conversations about homelessness. It'll show up on a housing podcast. It'll show up on a public health podcast. It shows up in lots of different places from time to time. But you have this dedicated channel that is raising awareness for lots of different people about the specific challenges that exist with regards to addressing and hopefully ending homelessness. So gratitude, yes, like, thank you. But I also want to say to you and to everybody who's involved in this work, and to the individuals who are living in communities or serving communities or whatever it is, just don't give up. Like, this is not, I'm gonna curse again. It's fucking hard. Like, it is hard. There's no easy night, but there's no reason to give up on this either, right? We have to keep working toward this goal. I think that's, you said your quote from your dad that the only sad thing would be to not try, and we have to keep working. We're not always going to get it right. Right. We're going to make mistakes along the way. We're going to look back 10 years later and say, Jesus, I wish I hadn't done that. Right. But we have to keep trying. We're going to get there. And as bad as things are right now, they're not permanent. But I'm going to talk to Ian specifically. Don't give up, man. When you stay in this, people are hearing the message, and it's getting harder, but I have an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old, and I have a lot of hope because it's the next generation of people who fucking get it. And we've got, there's good times ahead if we just stick with it, if we can keep our heads down and not get pushed off the path.